Hi, and welcome to the Right to Remain Silent podcast. I'm Jim Weber, your host and guide through actual accounts of intriguing and fascinating true crime stories as told by the law enforcement professional that experienced the event. The Right to Remain Silent podcast makes no exaggeration of fact, doesn't glamorize details, or sensationalize reality. The format here is basic. Real stories from real cops. Lastly, please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Doing this will help me continue to provide you, the listener, with captivating and relevant true crime stories. Now, let's listen in on today's episode. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Right to Remain Silent True Crime Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Weber, and today's guest is Scott Fulmer, a licensed private investigator in the great state of Texas. Scott is also an author of the book Confessions of a Private Eye, My 30 Years Investigating Cheaters, Frauds, Missing Persons, and Crooks. And Scott is also the host of the true crime podcast, A Study in Crime. Scott, hey, thank you so much for your time talking with me today. I'm confident listeners are going to find this conversation very interesting.
Thank you, Jim. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, good deal. Well, for the listeners out there, today we're going to be discussing an interesting investigation that Scott worked involving employee theft and inventory shortage from a large company that supplied food products to grocery stores. Scott, was this in the state of Texas, this investigation?
It was, and we're going to say that it was in Houston today, but it wasn't. So
All right, but it was in somewhere in that region.
somewhere
Sounds
in
good.
Texas, yes.
All right, good deal. Well, hey, I think before we get started here, I'm going to read your bio so listeners who aren't familiar with you know who you are, know a little bit about you, and they can learn about your career, okay?
That works. Thank you.
Awesome, absolutely. All right, here we go. Scott B. Fulmer is a licensed private investigator and the principal at Fulmer PI, a full-service investigative firm based in San Antonio, Texas. For the last 30 years, he has conducted investigations for the state, federal, and private sectors. This includes a stint as a paralegal investigator for a state public defender system at the appellate level and a special investigator with the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, where he conducted national security background investigations for the United States government. He's the author of Confessions of a Private Eye, My 30 Years Investigating Cheaters, Frauds, Missing Persons, and Crooks. This book offers the reader an accurate and behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to be a real-life private investigator. It's available on Amazon, in audio, ebook, paperback, and hardbook. Scott is also the host of A Study in Crime, a weekly true crime podcast every Tuesday. He talks with investigators, journalists, authors, and others about well-known and not so well-known true crime cases. Scott has a criminal justice and security management degree from the University of Texas at San Antonio and is also a sought-after speaker and presenter. He's a decorated combat veteran of the Gulf War, where he served as an indirect fire infantryman, mortars, in the 2nd Armored Division, Hell on Wheels. Scott has been married to Valerie, the love of his life, for 34 years. They have 3 wonderful adult children and their first grandchild on the way. Well, congratulations on that. Scott lives in the beautiful Texas Hill Country near San Antonio. Scott, that is an outstanding bio, and I'd like to thank you for your military service. I greatly appreciate you.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All right, good deal. One last question before we get into our conversation today. Could you tell us why you became a private investigator? How you got into that?
Yeah, so I had when I was a child, I I really was into mysteries. The Hardy Boys, the Three Investigators, Sherlock Holmes. I even read some Nancy Drew stories. I just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to eat up all the mysteries I could get to. Love the Rockford
Yeah.
Files, that type of thing. So it was something I was really interested in. I didn't know if I was going to do that or become a police officer. I was also interested in that. But when I was 16, my uncle George Kane, who's no longer with us, but he became a private investigator in San Antonio, and so I went with him on surveillance several times, and it was like I thought we were going to solve Watergate. I was on the edge of my seat. It was
Yeah.
fantastic. Then you grow up and you're like, it's not that exciting most of the time, but anyway. So once that happened, and I just kind of got the bug, and ever since then, I wanted to do that. I come from a family that had a lot of money, kind of poor family with a big family, so I
Mm-hmm.
joined the army to get money for college, and I got to use the GI Bill, got my degree in criminal justice, and then I've went out to be a private investigator since that time.
Wow. All right. Good deal. Well, I've really been looking forward to hearing the details of this investigation that we're going to talk about today. And I think it's going to give the general public an idea of how businesses deal with theft or product loss and what is done about that stuff kind of behind the scenes. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. And I'm pretty confident in your time and in your career, you've worked a lot of interesting investigations. But the case we're going to talk about today involves employee theft and inventory shortage involving a like a grocery or food product distribution business. So let's just jump right into this conversation here. And I'm going to kind of turn the floor over to you and let you kind of walk us through this investigation, how you became aware of it, how you became involved in it, and just kind of talk us through how it unfolded. And then I'll kind of maybe interject some questions as you go along.
Certainly, certainly. I will say from the start that I'm using pseudonyms. I'm
Sure.
calling the company Caliente Sabrosa Foods. That's
All
just
right.
its real name, but it's a large wholesale provider of Mexican food products. If you went to your grocery store, you would see them on the shelf. You would know who they are. They make tortillas and taco shells, salsa, just pretty much anything for any kind of Mexican food. And we got a call from the warehouse manager, a guy named Rocky Sepulveda, which that's also a pseudonym.
Pseudonym. All right.
And he said that they had some kind of shortage and they couldn't figure out where it was going, where, somebody was taking something, but they figured it was about 2 pallets a week. And I don't recall how much the pallet was, but it was several $1,000s per pallet. And
Mm,
this was years ago, uh, before, right at the advent of cell phones, before texts. You couldn't text at that time. I know that. So it
okay.
was a while. So it'd be a lot more these days. But so I met with Rocky. I had to put on one of those really cool hairnet things, which I don't like to wear because it's a food processing place.
Well,
And we walked through his warehouse, and I asked him a lot of questions about, how you do things, the key control, stuff like that. Who had who had the control of the keys, and there was a little loose issues there. They didn't really ever get keys back from people, and some folks had
mm,
keys that shouldn't have keys. They had no alarm system, which is hard to believe. And
right.
they had these really old cameras, security cameras, and they were, if you remember, they were the VHS tapes
Oh
where you
yeah,
had to
we're
put a
going.
tape
Yep.
in. Yeah, and I'm sure you know this, most folks would run that tape and it would work for a week, and then it would tape over for the next week, and they would leave the same tape in, and so by the time you needed it, you couldn't make anything out on the tape at all.
Yep.
And they also had, I mean, they did that for money, of course. They didn't want to buy a new VHS tape every time. So, and they also had some dead spots in the warehouse where these cameras, this was not a complicated, it was not a really good system. And so there was a lot of dead spots that the cameras didn't cover. But we pretty much kind of cut down to the fact that it had to be somebody on a closing crew or maybe somebody coming back later at night. And so we started doing surveillance. The warehouse closed at about 9 o'clock, and this happened twice, by the way. This is the first time it occurred.
Okay.
And we figured that what they were probably doing was they were coming in after they closed, no alarm, somebody had a key, and
Hmm.
they were taking a couple of pallets out or taking some food out, and then they were selling it. I mean, nobody steals that much just to use for their own table, right?
Right. They're not just
So
swiping something for dinner one night.
that's right. Yeah. So we figured and this occurred in Houston, and there's about 3 million Mexican restaurants in Houston. And
Hmm.
so we figured they were selling the products, for pennies on the dollar to local mom and pops that would not ask any questions.
Right.
And of course, anything they get was profit for them since they didn't cost them anything to make the profit, to make the product. So we started doing surveillance, and the warehouse was in a uh, kind of a warehouse district, and there was these two warehouses down this. There's a road in the middle, and these two warehouses that run side by side, parallel, and each so they had like sorry. Every once in a while, they would have doors, and they would have garage doors and docks and things like that. And there were different clients in different ones, but we were
Sure.
focused, of course, on the one where Caliente Sabroso had their business. And so we did surveillance for a couple of weeks, and really no luck. Didn't have anything. Couldn't catch the guy. We were not doing it 24 hours straight. We
Well,
were
that's what I was going to ask. Was your surveillance a daily thing and a shift, or was it kind of sporadic at different days and times?
So this particular client, and this is not uncommon, they did not want to spend a whole lot of money. And so they said, well, let's do surveillance maybe 9 o'clock, when they close, to maybe midnight, maybe 1 o'clock, a couple of
Hmm.
times a week.
Sure.
Thinking hopefully we're gonna get lucky. So we did that for 2 weeks and didn't get any luck. Nothing happened. But then finally, I think it was the third week, we struck pay dirt. And so
Yeah,
what
explain how that unfolded. Like, what'd you see, and how'd you feel about that?
what we did was, it was me and another investigator named Mario Salazar, also a pseudonym.
All right.
And what we did was, he was in the warehouse. We secreted him inside the warehouse, hidden with a video camera. I was outside. I was at a business, a warehouse that was empty, that was right across the way. It was probably 30 yards between these two warehouse rows. And
Hmm.
so, and the windows were tinted. It's Texas. So I could stand there and see, anybody approach. And so, of course, I'm standing there, and it had been raining. This was in November. It was cold. There was some fog rolling in, and I'm kind of shivering in that warehouse, stomping my feet, saying, "Let's go, let's go."
Yeah. Wishing you had a
And
bigger coat.
right, yeah, I, yeah, I'm not really a coat guy, but yeah, every once in a while you got to wear one in Texas, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So suddenly I see this guy just walking. It's nighttime. There's some street lights here and there, but I see him walking down the road, and he approaches the warehouse, and he climbs the stairs up to their door. And so I get on my cell phone and I let Mario know there's one guy. He's coming in now. I couldn't text. There was no texting capability at that
Hmm.
time, just cell phones. And so the guy walks in, and I see the glint of the key. He puts the key in, and I guess from the light, the moonlight or whatever, I
Kind
can
of a
see.
little shimmer. Yeah.
Right, right. And so I knew he had a key. So he opens the door and he goes in. And some of the stuff I learned later on, but Mario is in there hidden, and he's like on top of some pallet somewhere, and he's taking video of the guy. And the guy gets in a forklift, and he zooms over, and he's doing this weird route. He's staying away from he's traveling in the dead areas of the cameras. I mean, he knew what was going on,
Hmm.
obviously. So he loads up one pallet, and he moves it over to a one of those, bays, the garage door bays, and he goes back and he gets another pallet, and he moves it over. And so while that's happening, and while he has two of them, I hear this noise, and I look up, and there's a big cargo truck coming down the road as well, and turns out to be a U-Haul. Not the real big ones, probably like a 15-foot, 10-foot U-Haul.
Kind of like those bigger box trucks.
Right,
Okay.
right. And so he stops, And then I hear him put the transmission in reverse. He goes, dunk, how they do. And he backs up to the bay perfectly. I used to be able to back up my own car really well until we got backup cameras. Now I can't back up to save my life. But this
There
guy
you go.
backed up the U-Haul perfectly. And I couldn't see at that point. I could only hear. I could hear the garage door go up, and there's a little crack of light. And Mario tells me later on, basically what this guy did was they got the two pallets, they loaded them in the truck, and then took the forklift out, parked the forklift, put the garage door down, closed the door. And I think at the time those two pallets were worth about $20,000 worth of food product.
Oh, that's pretty substantial.
Yeah, it is. It's 10,000 per pallet, so it was a lot. And
Sure.
so they end up leaving. So they end up leaving, and I was the one on the outside. Soon as they leave, I ran out and got in my car and followed them. And they went to a nearby neighborhood. It wasn't too far away. It was actually 5, 6 minutes away. I mean,
Oh,
obviously
that's not bad.
these guys were employees that wanted to live close to the business, so it works well when you're stealing too, I guess.
Yeah, sounds
So
like it.
he drops the truck stops, drops the first guy off, and I at this point I didn't have any kind of a fancy night vision cameras or anything, but the guy stops at his front door and turns to wave goodbye, and I'm able to get a good look at his face and get his address. And then I follow the next guy, and he goes to his place, and I follow him there, and he backs up the U-Haul into his back to the garage so nobody can steal the stuff he's already stolen.
Right.
And you don't want
Got
anybody
to
stealing the
protect
stuff you
that
stole.
stuff.
That's right. It wasn't the best neighborhood, so
Yeah.
uh, and so that we did that. I think we did it one more time. It was the same guys, same deal. And so the next time the Rocky told us, all right, we're going to have the police do it this time. Houston police are going to show up. You don't have to worry about it. Your job is done. So we had identified that these guys were coming. I think it was these guys had no imagination. They were coming like every Tuesday at
Hmm.
midnight. So they didn't want to. They didn't like a break. They didn't want to be convenienced with coming at different days and
They
times.
didn't
So
want to switch it up.
right, which they should have, right?
Right.
So I did not know about this till I talked to Rocky afterwards. But basically, Houston PD were there, and the guys came. They did the same thing with the forklifts. Forklift put the pallets inside the U-Haul, and then that's when all hell broke loose. The Houston PD came out and arrested both these guys. Found out one of them was a shift leader on the closing shift, and
For
he
the
was
actual business they're stealing from, right?
right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
both of them worked there. One was a regular employee, a warehouse employee, and the other was a shift leader on a warehouse crew.
Hmm.
And I he had been sitting there. He was unhappy about his life, and he had been sitting there. We found out later on he'd been sitting there at lunch and eating his bologna sandwich, looking around at the warehouse, thinking he could make some extra money. And he noticed the cameras were really old and they didn't move or anything like that. And plus, he could go into the office and see the closed circuit TVs and see where
Hmm.
the cameras were pointed at.
Sure.
And because he was a shift leader, he had a key. And because the company they didn't make any kind of effort on keeping track of who had what key, as you
No
should do.
tracking. They just kind of randomly give them out, and if you got a
Right,
key, you
right.
got a key.
You got a key. Yeah. So there was no way to track him to that specific key. There was no way to prove it.
Okay.
So that's anyway, he was caught red-handed. So after it was over, I told Rocky, I said, you guys need to make some changes. First, maybe get an alarm system. That might work.
That could be helpful.
Yeah, because then you only know who is setting the alarm and who's not setting the alarm. I recommended background investigations on employees before you hire them. But basically, he said, yeah, we don't want to spend the money. I said, you really
Hmm.
need some better cameras, some really better security cameras, because it wasn't him. He just says the company does not want to spend the money. And I said, you just lost $20,000, and who knows how many times that had been happening. It'd been
Right.
happening for a couple of months, they suspect.
Hmm.
So it was closer to a couple of $100,000, and you could certainly do the cameras and alarm
Wow.
for less than
Yeah.
that. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, those are great suggestions to make to the company.
So Jim, I told him. And when he told me I don't want the company doesn't want to do that, I said, I'll be seeing you again in the future.
You were pretty confident.
That's right. I am not
Yeah.
psychic. I'm not psychic, although I play one on TV, but I knew I was going to come back to that business, and sure enough, a few years later I did get another call.
Wow. All right. Another call from the same business for the same issue?
Yep, same
All right.
business, Caliente Sabroso Foods in Houston, same warehouse supervisor, Rocky Sepulveda, same problem. The only thing different was they'd moved to a different warehouse now. It was a lot bigger, but it was set
Okay.
up. It was set up, an industrial park where you have, when I say road, it's just like a paved area, cement, where 18
Hmm.
wheelers can come in, tractor trailers can back up to the docks, load up, and drive out.
And
And
those are the bays for the listeners kind of
right,
trying to envision this. These are like, I envision like a big UPS facility with big bay doors with like you said, tractor trailers backing up to these. Is that what this box truck or this U-Haul truck was backing up to that first time when they took those pallets out of that business? Those
yeah,
large doors like that? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they back
Okay.
right up to the bay, and that's where they could, put everything in the vehicle. So,
So, all right. So you get that second call a couple years later. So walk us through that. What happens then?
so I get the second call. I go back. I talk to the same guy, Rocky. He recognizes me. I put the hairnet on again, and or
Was it
those
the
hair
same
covers.
hairnet? Was it the
Right, it could
same
have
hairnet?
been. It may have been. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Or though someone may have stolen that one, it may be a new one. Probably. So, yet again, Rocky says, we suspect that somebody is stealing from us. And I wanted to say, why am I not surprised? But I said,
Yeah.
really?
Did
Do
you act
tell.
like, yeah, did you pretend you were shocked?
A little bit, not very much. I didn't want to.
Right.
So they pretty much, he said, well, we think it's the closing crew. It's the same deal, same
Hmm.
scenario. We think it's the closing crew. They closed at like 10 now. And he says, we think it's someone on the closing crew. They're coming back at night, just like the first time, to steal stuff.
Hmm.
Now, the reason for the listeners, the reason why the company doesn't do that investigation is because they are not an objective third party, and that's why they hire a private investigator to come out and to document what happened,
Okay,
which
that
is
makes sense.
which is important should it go to court and that type of
Sure.
thing. Um, by the way, I failed to mention the first time it was not in the news at all because, and this is very common when companies get ripped off, they do not want the public to know. It's
Ah, yeah.
embarrassing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
They don't
embarrassing.
want to broadcast that.
Right, right. So it was not in the
Okay,
news.
that makes sense.
So anyway, so this scenario is a little bit different, and the way their warehouse was like in the middle of this whole industrial park, and it was really hard to get to get a good view. There were several tractor trailers, or just the trailers themselves, that were backed up to various bays of other companies that
Hmm.
never moved, that were always there. And the people in the closing crew, they pretty much knew all the cars. They were very familiar with all the vehicles. And so I couldn't get in my surveillance vehicle and drive there and sit there and wait because
You'd
they
kind of
would know
stick
who it
out.
was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had this particular company, I believe, was headquartered in Dallas, and we had them rent a minivan, and they parked the minivan close enough to the warehouse, but far enough away that I could sneak into it at night. And they told the closing crew that a salesman had used this vehicle when he was working in outskirts of Houston, and we're leaving it there for a little bit of time. They were gonna drive it back up to Dallas or whatever. So just
That
make sure it's okay, that type of thing.
yeah, that's a pretty sharp tactic there.
Well, it is. It didn't work very well though because I
Oh.
I have so when you have a surveillance vehicle like I do, you put as much you end up putting a lot of miles on a vehicle.
Hmm.
So I had a Toyota Camry once. I put 300,000 miles
Oh,
on
wow. You're
in
not kidding
surveillance.
then.
Yeah, I've got a Ford right now, and I'm at 250,000. And so my point is, we use these vehicles for as long as we can and get the money out of them. So this particular van was brand new. I was not used to brand new cars. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of bells and whistles in brand new cars that I did not know because mine did not.
Buttons and switches and
Yes.
yep, yep.
So the first night I go to open the car and the alarm goes off, bam, 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 and I couldn't figure out how to turn it off because it was like a remote or whatever. I finally turned it off and then I left for the night because obviously I kind
Yeah.
of screwed myself on that one.
Yeah.
So I decided to try it again, and again it was the same scenario where the company didn't want to spend a lot of money, so they wanted do 2 or 3 hours, a couple of nights a week. Let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we did this for a couple of weeks, nothing. The next time I got in the car, my old car didn't do this. The new ones did. I open the door and all the lights come on. All the interior lights are on. And then I'm sitting there trying to find how to turn the light off. And then this is embarrassing, but true tales. My rear end hits the horn and I sit on the horn, brrr. So I had
Yep.
to abandon that one too.
Hey, you're telling this story and I'm flashing back to my law enforcement career. I completely understand where you're coming from here.
Yes, I'm sure you do because I don't care how much your expense or how expensive your equipment is. Everything breaks down. Stuff that will work time and time again. You'll get ready to check it before you go out. It works great. You'll go out. It doesn't work.
You're 100% right. I agree a thousand percent there.
I don't know why. So anyway, I said, well, we got to come up with a different game plan. So I was working with another investigator at the time by the name of Stu Hall, which is a pseudonym.
All right.
And Stu and I went by there during the daytime, kind of checked it out, kind of figured out what we could do. And so what we decided was Stu was going to get on the roof of the adjacent warehouse and look down.
Hmm.
So from the roof, he had a really great vantage point of the warehouse. He could look into their cargo doors. He could see the people working. He could see when they leave, that type of thing. I was around the corner. Around the corner was this bakery, and I was parked at the bakery. I couldn't see anything. And so I was just sitting there waiting, and Stu was going to tell me, he kept me abreast of what was going to go on, and then I would
Hmm.
follow somebody out of there. It was great, except the bakery smelled really good, and I got hungry while I was sitting there. I love bread,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. I was going to say it would be really sweet if you were
Yeah.
inside that bakery looking out.
Yeah, but it didn't work that way. So, and the other thing is we had a hard time getting Stu up in the up on top of the roof because a lot of these warehouses, I don't know if you've noticed, they'll have a ladder goes to the roof, but it stops about 15 feet before the ground,
Right,
so that
right,
kids and vandals don't get
right.
into it. So
That's a great
Stu,
point. I was going to ask how he actually got up there.
we needed a forklift to be honest with you, but no. So he had one of these tow ropes in his car, just like a
Hmm.
rope with a hook on it to tow
Yeah,
your vehicle.
yeah.
And he did this John Wayne thing and lassoed the bottom rung. And then he got started like Batman. And I'm sitting there pushing his rear end. It's the only time I've touched a man's rear end. But anyway, probably another podcast.
Yeah.
And so I'm
Yeah.
I'm pushing him up, and he finally, I'm only 5'8". I'm not very tall, but I did what I
Hmm.
could. He
Yep.
finally gets to the bottom rung and he catches on. He was in good shape, so and he gets on the top of the roof, and he gives me the lay of the land. And one of the good things was that there were lights on the top of the roof facing down, and so because of that, you really couldn't see him. If you looked up, you would just see the lights,
Okay. That
which
makes
was
sense.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's standing there with his camera, and he's able to look down and kind of keep me abreast of what's going on, who's coming and going, that type of thing. And so we did this, I think we did this 1 or 2 nights, and again, nothing happened. And Rocky and the company are starting to get irritated at us. We're like, it's surveillance. If we knew when they would do this, we would just show up at that time. But
Right,
that's the
right.
nature of surveillance. Yeah. That's why we wait.
Very
And
unpredictable.
right. And so, and I don't remember this may have been February. I don't remember when it was, but it was also cold and it was very windy.
Mm.
I was fine in my car smelling the bread with the heat on, but Stu is on top of the roof and he is freezing. he's got a coat, but I mean the wind is brutal, it's cold, and he said by the time this is over, he says I almost couldn't feel my face. That was that bad. So
Sometimes you get the good assignment and location, sometimes you do not.
that's right. The stuff you got to suffer through, right?
Right, right,
So anyway, so what happens is, and the Stu and he tells me this later on because I didn't actually see it until I see his videotape. So around 10 o'clock, we see the warehouse, all the warehouse doors close except one. And we see one person leave, and we can see a few of the guys milling around. And we knew it was closing time. So we were assuming they were going to leave. We're going to wait a couple more hours. Nobody shows up. Then we were going to leave. So a couple hours, I'm sorry. So we sit there and wait. And all of a sudden, all these cars show up, trucks, vans, regular cars. It was probably about 10 of them, and they all park in a row right next to each other. You know, like in the movie The Italian Job. Remember when they
oh
have the
yeah,
little
exactly.
Mini Coopers and they load the
Yeah,
gold in?
that's a
Yeah.
great description. Well, and I was going to ask you, so were these cars trickling in individually, or did they kind of caravan in or around the same time, or how did that unfold?
Yeah, they all came at the same time. I mean, it was obviously, let's synchronize our watches, gentlemen. Uh,
Right,
and
right,
so, yeah, they all came at the same time, which is kind of bizarre. Because if it was one at a time here or there, we thought we would assume they were picking up employees.
right.
Instead, they all show up at the same time and they all park next to each other as if they had done that very thing before in the past.
Mm-hmm. They were very skilled at it.
Yeah, probably because they had done it very in the past. So,
Right.
so then one of the things that happens is they all park, all the vehicles turn off, and out of these cars come women and children. I kid you not, it was like some kind of horror movie or something,
Really.
because it was at night. But anyway, all these
Mhm.
women and children come out of the vehicle, and the kids are all laughing. It's midnight, but I think it was midnight. No, let me correct myself. I said they closed at 10. They actually closed at midnight because I remember thinking these kids should be in bed. They shouldn't
Oh
be
yeah.
out here at midnight, in the industrial park.
So,
So
and
the
when you say kids, you're talking like school age kids, not, early 20s, young
No, no.
adults.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
talking like 10-year-old kids,
Oh, okay.
12-year-old, 14-year-old kids,
All right.
kids that go to elementary school or middle school.
Okay.
And so them and the women all go into the warehouse. And we thought, well, maybe they're having an employee meeting. Maybe they're having a buffet or something. I don't know what,
Right, right.
because you never know never know what's going to happen in an investigation.
You
So
just can't tell. Yep.
no, you can't. But then all of a sudden, they all start trickling out of the warehouse, the women and the children, and they're carrying boxes. And it's boxes of tortilla chips and boxes of potato chips and boxes of chips and salsa and all kinds of stuff. It's basically food product that the company Caliente Sabrosa sells to grocery stores.
Okay. So it's product from that business
Right.
coming
Absolutely.
out at midnight.
Yeah. And that's not normal.
Right,
Uh,
right.
so So they are walking out and they are putting it in their vehicles. They open the backs of the vans or car doors. They put in the back of the truck, and they all go back in again. And so this went on for I think 2 or 3 trips. It's suddenly they're joined by the employees, and there's about 10 guys on this closing crew that were there, and them and the women and the children all took all this product and took it out and put it in their vehicle and we thought, well, they're stealing it, and this is the way they're not using a forklift this time.
Yeah. Are
But
they, I envision in my mind as you explain this, sneaking out of the door and looking left and right and walking out and tucking it in and sneaking back. How were they? Were they just walking out, talking and having conversations and casually putting this into the car? Or were they kind of trying to be sneaky about it?
they were walking out there in front of God and everyone. They didn't care. They were happy. The kids were laughing like it was a game.
Wow.
Help
Wow.
mom and dad steal inventory.
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
they were talking, laughing. It was kind of a fun thing. There was no concern looking around
Not
that,
a care in the world, it
not a
sounds
care in
like.
the world. Yeah.
All right. Okay. What happened
So,
from there?
so we figured it was about $4,000 or $5,000 per night since it's not a couple of pallets, but it was a lot.
Hmm.
Uh, probably about $4,000 or $5,000 per night, and they were doing this about 2 nights a week, and they'd been doing
Wow.
it for months because it took a company a while to figure out we're missing inventory. Things are
Mm-hmm.
not. They use exception reports and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, of course, they all take off. All the people leave, and I can't follow everybody, but they
Right.
all leave, and they all leave in different directions, of course. And so Stu is still on the roof. So I follow. I think I followed a guy that had a pickup truck. He had a lot of stuff in his vehicle,
Okay.
and I follow him to the other side of town, and he backs up to his garage. He goes to a residence, and he opens his garage door, and inside his garage, from top to bottom, left to right, are boxes and boxes of the Mexican food product that he had already taken.
Wow.
It was like those Inca walls down in Peru. You couldn't put a card through between them. There was
From
boxes
floor to
everywhere.
ceiling. It looked like probably like the satellite warehouse from the legitimate business.
That's right. Yeah, it
Huh.
could have been for all I knew, but I don't think so.
Right.
So he unloads his stuff. There was a little bit of room up front. He unloads that stuff. Had a bit of a time closing the door because it was packed full.
Wow.
And we later found out that these people were using the product, but they were also giving some to friends, and a few of them were selling them as well to local mom and pop, Mexican food restaurants and other
Wow.
types of places. Little I know in New York they call them bodegas, but
Yeah.
corner market stores,
Mm-hmm.
mom and pop market stores in the neighborhoods.
Sure.
And so this went on again. Next time, Stu and I just stayed there at the bottom, and as soon as they left, he followed one person, I followed another, followed a lady back, a husband and a wife. He was on the closing crew, followed him and his wife and their child back to an apartment complex, and they'd only taken about 3 boxes, and so they get out, and I'm parked like 2 cars away from them, videotaping him. And I get the evidence, get their faces, the employee's face, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and so we documented that again. And again, I took all this to Rocky Sepulveda with Caliente Sabroso Foods and told him, "Here's the deal." And so the following, again, I wasn't there for the for the excitement of the police. Uh,
Sure.
the Houston police was there the next time this happened, and they busted everybody and so it turned out to be the entire closing crew of, I think, 9 or 10 people that were in on it.
Wow.
And again, it was not in the news because the company was even bigger now.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not want to, this company had started out in a woman's kitchen in Houston. And it
Really?
had gotten bigger, yeah, in the 1940s or 50s, I believe. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Now it was humongous. It was a regional company. And
Mm-hmm.
so they did not want anyone to know about this type of deal.
Yeah, that doesn't look good for business, does it?
It does not. So they found out a few things. After the arrest, they discovered that, as I mentioned, it was the entire closing crew, 9 or 10 folks, and that the manager of the closing crew had been fired from a previous company for, you guessed it, doing the
Uh, I,
same
w-
thing.
I was going to say, I wonder what for.
Yes, for the folks keeping score at home, he was doing the same thing at a previous company.
All right.
And you might think, well, why didn't they arrest him or he'd get in trouble there? And
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing you should know. A lot of companies, I wouldn't recommend this, but if you steal from them, a lot of them will just fire you. They'll ask for restitution or they'll just fire you and they won't go to the police because they don't want the publicity and they don't want other
Mm,
employees to know what you did and how easy it was.
that makes sense.
So once again, I recommended to Rocky, I said, you know what? Background investigations might have helped. Somebody had talked to
Yeah.
some,
Had they not implemented your suggestion, or had they done that, this could have been avoided.
yeah, it very well could have.
Yeah.
I also recommended an alarm system. I still didn't have an alarm system. And This was a $1 million company, and I said, you guys you're hemorrhaging this stuff, and this is the second time I've been here. This is the
Hmm.
second time that we know of. We don't know how long it's been going on, and there could be other people doing it at other where they had a couple other warehouses too.
Sure.
And I said, you need to get, by this time, I think they had digital cameras. You need to get some low light digital cameras. You need to, because they still had the really old ones.
Yeah.
And pretty much it was the same answer. We don't want to spend the money. And so I said, I didn't say it, but I thought, I'll see you again. But I haven't
Yeah.
seen him. I haven't seen him since. So
Huh.
maybe they got their act together. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they finally took your suggestions. Hopefully.
Or maybe they're tired of me busting people and they want to hire somebody else to do it.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you this. Is it, in your opinion, is it unusual in employee theft investigations for such a large number of employees to be involved in something like that? That kind of just surprises me that, not just one or two people were stealing, but that a whole shift of people were doing that. It seems like if you have that many people involved, in addition to their family, that eventually word would get out that they would be concerned about it. Is it unusual for that many folks to be involved in a employee or business theft like that?
So my experience is, yes, that is unusual. In fact, I was surprised when I realized it was the entire closing crew. I assumed that most of the people would leave and it would be, a couple of people, maybe three at the most, because, people cannot keep secrets
Right,
and
exactly.
it would get out. But yeah, normally it's going to be just a handful of people, one person, two people, that type of thing. And
Hmm.
for your listeners that they may or may not be aware of this, they probably are. Most of the what they call shrinkage, most of the money that goes out of a business is stolen by employees, not by
Hmm.
shoplifters
Not by
or
just random shoplifters coming
right.
in.
Yeah.
Huh. In your experiences throughout your career, is this type of investigation a fairly common thing that you would deal with? Employee theft or product shrinkage, that type of thing?
It is, and a lot of company. It really depends on the how advanced the company is. Nowadays, companies have these digital cameras that move. They have motion detectors. They have alarm systems. They have key control. They don't even use keys. They use key cards, so they
Hmm.
know who used the card at what time. When they got in, when they left, and that type of thing. But no
Yeah.
matter what a company does, employees people find a way to get around it.
Yep. You're exactly right. Let me ask this. Jumping back to the first scenario where you got involved with this company and started your investigation, did the company have an idea? I mean, clearly they knew they were losing product, but did they have any idea of how it was being lost to give you a suggestion to point you in a direction? Or was it they're like, hey, we're losing stuff. We don't have any idea. Can you help us figure it out?
It was pretty much the latter. We're losing stuff. We don't know how it's happening. Now they had the drivers that they had were employee drivers of these tractor trailers, and so they had a fairly good billing system. The pay bill or way bill, whatever you call that. So they
Mm-hmm.
know because that's another way things get stolen is they put too much stuff on a truck. They sell some of the stuff off the truck, in a back
Right.
alley, and then they deliver the rest. But that wasn't the case here. That was one thing they did have set up very well. So after talking to Rocky, we figured the only way this stuff is walking out of here is after hours.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
one's coming back.
And there you go. And you were right. Any idea of how many folks were actually arrested on this second stage of your investigation?
So I believe the employees were it was like 9 or 10 employees, and again, I wasn't privy to a lot. With a private investigator, we do a lot of work,
You
and
do
then we
the
don't find out.
footwork.
Right? Yeah, like you did when you work for the government. You do the
Hmm.
footwork, and the U.S. attorneys they do the other stuff, and They may
Correct.
tell you what's going on. They may not.
Right, right. There's that disconnect.
Absolutely. And so,
Okay.
yeah, so I knew the employees had been arrested by the police. If I may not be, I may be mistaken, but I pretty much think the family members were left alone, but the guys ended up losing their jobs. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, that that I find that investigation interesting. Seeing how and that's not just a problem solely that this company had on your investigation. This is a nationwide,
oh yeah,
worldwide problem that businesses deal with on I'm confident on a consistent basis.
absolutely. Yeah. Doesn't matter the size of the company, whether you're a small mom and
Yeah.
pop or a large multi-million dollar company. In fact, in some ways, I think it's easier if you're a larger, multi-million dollar nationwide company because you've got so many offices, so many people, so many bells and whistles. It's easy to take money here and take money there or take product here without
Hmm.
not without folks knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think that's like I said, an interesting investigation. Would you have time to maybe discuss just general private investigation questions that I might have for you?
Sure, sure. My time is
Awesome.
yours, Jim.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let me ask you this. What are some of the biggest maybe misconceptions that people might have about private investigators or private investigations? I know you referenced the Rockford files and,
Hmm.
those types of things. And I think in previous conversations or communications we had, Magnum PI was referenced as well. I remember watching those shows, when I was a kid with my dad, and I found those shows fascinating as well. But
They're great entertainment.
yeah, absolutely. But, putting all that aside and cutting, down to the quick here about the actual business, what are some misconceptions that people might have about private investigators?
Well, there's several that come to mind, and I can tell you that the genesis of these misconceptions is the Rockford Files, Magnum
Hmm.
PI, movies, television, because
Hmm.
I don't care what job you have, whether you're a rock star or a Secret Service agent or a PI, there are times when the job is routine and boring even. And that's of course when mistakes happen. So, but in this case, I would say that one of the biggest ones is we don't break and enter. Jim
Hmm.
Rockford had his little tool, his little lockpick
His
kit.
little set. Yep.
Yeah, he would pick the locks and go indoors and things like that. Excuse me. We don't break and enter. It's called B&E, and it is a crime.
Yeah.
The government frowns on that when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point because you're exactly right. Every TV show or movie, you have an investigator busting in, or picking locks and sneaking into places. Like you have to abide by the law,
Right.
So that is a great point.
And one of
This
the
episode of the Right to Remain Silent podcast is brought to you by Streetwise 360 Law Enforcement Consulting, your go-to resource for expert law enforcement training. Whether it's conducting successful criminal investigations, performing undercover work, mastering interviews, conducting surveillance, utilizing confidential informants, or case strategy, Streetwise 360 gives officers the real-world skills they need for success. Learn more at streetwise-360.com because knowledge is power in the field. Now
great
back to the
point.
show.
And one of the reasons that that's a bad deal is because usually in TV they break in and they steal some evidence. They take some evidence. Well, if I did that, first of all, breaking and entering is a crime, and second of all, if I take any evidence that of a crime or of the case I'm working on, that evidence cannot be used at all.
Great point.
Fruit of the poisonous tree, it was taken during the commission of a crime, so it cannot be used at all.
Yeah, that is a great point.
The couple other things come to mind. We don't hack into your wife's Facebook or your mistress's Facebook or
Uh,
your computer. Now, are there people that will do that? Of course. But I'm
Hmm.
talking about the 99.9% of all private investigators who abide by the law
Sure, you're
and
above the board legitimate
right.
folks.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can't even have someone if you suspect your wife is having an affair with someone, you can't have a PI hack into her Facebook. I don't care if you own the computer.
Yeah,
It's still a crime because it's her account.
right.
And I think the other misconception is that it's exciting all the time, and it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Um, it
Yeah, it's
is,
not always driving fast cars and surveilling people and, hanging out in fancy restaurants.
yeah, so I do a lot of surveillance, and so it's like 90% boredom and 10% sheer terror when you're following somebody. And but yeah, there's a lot of boring times. I mean, it's not as
Yeah.
exciting as it sounds. So
Yeah. Well, let me ask this. You mentioned a husband and a wife and mistresses. Is that a common theme in work-wise that you've encountered that maybe a spouse believes there's infidelity going on and they want that looked into? Is that as common? Me as an outsider, I just think, well, yeah, that would be a common, pretty popular topic to investigate. Is that the case?
I would say yes or no. It is common, but it's not as common as people think. Because I'm sure they think that private investigators, every case we're working is a cheating case. That's not the
Hmm.
case. In
Hmm.
fact, any type of a case that deals with personal cases like families or individuals, those are referred to as domestic cases. And a cheating spouse is a domestic case, but more often than not, uh, the situation is not it. It doesn't happen that way because we've got no fault divorce, in
Hmm.
most of the states here in the U.S., and so you don't have to prove that your spouse was unfaithful. Now, it can help when you want to get spousal maintenance or
Sure.
alimony, as some call it. And so when we deal with the domestic cases, rather than, and I've done the cheating spouses, I've done that. But
Hmm.
primarily what it all comes down to mostly is child custody. The people are
Oh.
divorced or are going to divorce, and they are fighting over the custody of the children or a dog, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And can't make this stuff
Oh.
up. And and uh, and so we conduct surveillance over, to see during the visitation to see which party, the party that we're investigating, what are they doing with the child? Are they taking care of the child? Are they ignoring
Hmm.
the child? Are people coming over with weapons, drugs? What type of
Yeah.
lifestyle do they have? Is the child getting the attention? A lot of people will have their visitation period and they'll have their mother watch the child. Well, the judge does not like that at all.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a there's a reason
Boy.
you get visitation.
Yeah, these are great points that I've really, didn't think about. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Huh.
then the other thing is like the we'll just say the woman, for example, hires us because her ex-husband has a new girlfriend, and the girlfriend is uses she suspects uses drugs or
Hmm.
has a criminal involved with a criminal element. So we do criminal checks, we do surveillance to see if they're using drugs, just to see what type of atmosphere or what type of environment the child is being subjected to. And all of this is done to allow the parent, who is the more responsible one,
Hmm.
to get a better custody arrangement, which will help the child's
Sure. In the best interest of that child.
right.
Yeah, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned working background investigations for the federal government, for OPM, the Office
Hmm.
of Personnel Management. Uh, did you find those types of investigations interesting,
Oh
or
yeah,
what are your thoughts on those?
they're fascinating. Yeah, I worked for OPM, and when I say that, I'm not talking about the perfume or the drug. I'm talking about Office of Personnel Management, OPM.
Hmm.
And
Thanks for clarifying.
yeah, big fan of the perfume. My wife has that, but not of the drug. But anyway,
All right, good deal.
just want to clarify that up front.
Duly noted.
So yes, I worked for OPM, and this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and Bill Clinton was president and Al Gore was vice president, and they did an initiative where they privatized the what they called OFI, the Office of Federal Investigations, and that was a branch of OPM that conducted national security background investigations. So, if you wanted to work for the DEA, or you wanted to work for the Border Patrol or Customs or INS. I'm using the old names because that's what I remember them from. I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah,
ICE now.
yep,
You had to have a background investigation, and this wasn't a background investigation for employment. It was a background investigation to have a security clearance, you know,
right,
with the U.S. government.
right. They're very extensive investigations.
Very, very, very much so. And so it was that, and as you well know, people who work in government are required to be reinvestigated every 5 years, every 3 years, something to that effect, depending on your job. And so
Hmm.
we would do the reinvestigations as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was. I did it for 3 years, and then went out on my own after that. But I was just fascinated. I worked primarily in the Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, Texas area. I did a little some work in Arkansas, and then I ended up moving down to Huntsville, Texas. And Huntsville, Texas, for those who have never been there, is the headquarters of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are 8 state prisons in and around
Oh,
Huntsville,
wow. That's quite a bit.
including death row, as well as the walls unit. Well, it's called the walls because it's got these really high walls, and it was built during
Mm-hmm.
the Civil War. But anyway,
Mm.
that's where the death chamber is. And so I spent a lot of time investigating Texas correctional officers who wanted to be federal correctional officers because the feds pay a whole heck of a lot more.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
So I did that. There's a federal prison there in College Station, Bryan, Texas, near Texas A&M. So I did a lot of the. It's a all women's uh, federal prison. I did the reinvestigation on all the gynecologists at that particular federal prison. So it was never a dull
Wow.
moment.
Right. There's quite a bit of variety.
Yeah,
Yeah, and like we've talked in the past, I was an employee of the federal government and would just like you said, every 3 to 5 years would have a background investigation conducted due to the specific security clearance level that I had, and interacted with investigators, multiple times throughout my career, and was interviewed by investigators as part of background investigations on my coworkers
right.
as well. And, interesting side note, I never had one of these investigators say that they didn't enjoy doing those investigations. They always thought they were interesting. So,
They are
yeah.
interesting. I mean, we talked to we pulled records. I would go to courthouses, police departments, and pull actual records, excuse me, that
Hmm.
kind of thing. But most of it was interviewing, and I interviewed the subject that was trying to get the job, or the subject that was trying to get renewed on their security clearance. I would interview coworkers, occasionally ex-spouses. The government tries to frown on those because they never have anything good to say anyway.
Right.
Uh, Coworkers, ex-coworkers, professors, friends, mothers, fathers, lovers. I mean, just a
The whole gamut.
yeah. And the government's very, very precise. They have, depending on the investigation, if it's what they call a PRI, it's like a regular every 5 year reinvestigation. You
Hmm.
have to talk to X number of sources. You have to develop sources. You don't just talk to sources that the subject gives you. You have to find sources on your own because everyone they give you is going to say this guy is the best thing since
Oh,
sliced
he's the
bread.
greatest. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a case like that this guy was trying to get a job with the DC police. Excuse me, just a second.
Sure.
And they're trying to get a job with the DC police. And as you know, Washington, DC has a high African American population. Why is that important? Because this particular guy, I talked to a source that said that he was racist, that he used the N-word all the time. Now, sources will say anything, and
Hmm.
they'll say anything for any reason. So you don't take it for one person. You got to
Right.
talk to others. And I
Right.
talked to several other people who said that, oh no, this guy's the best thing. He's going to be a great cop, a DC cop in DC, in Washington DC.
Hmm.
No, not a racist bone in his body. And then I ended up talking to an ex-girlfriend of his. She worked at this great restaurant, Burger Boy. I love hamburgers, Jim. Burger Boy in College
Hmm.
Station, right across from Texas A&M. But anyway, um, so I interviewed her after work, and a lot of times, you have to build rapport. You always have to build rapport, but a lot of times people don't want to tell you what they know, and so
Hmm.
you have to do things like ask a question, put a psychological pause in, do something to get their attention,
Right.
uh, basically building rapport. And so, anyway, she ends up telling me, yes, he was racist. He used the N word all the time. Uh, Him and his friends would joke about killing black people, which is egregious. I can't believe anyone
Hmm.
would joke. I mean, these guys in their 20s, but there's no excuse. It's
None.
horrible.
Hmm.
And she gave me a few other names of individuals that I ended up talking to, and it was the same thing. So again, like before, I didn't adjudicate the case. I don't know what happened, but I don't think he got the job.
Yeah, and for folks that don't realize it, you're the finder of fact.
Right.
You're not the ultimate decision maker. Yeah, that sounds like it was pretty interesting as well.
It was.
What what's the most common type of case that you get hired for?
So it really would depend on what type of case you do. And private investigators, most of them specialize, not all of them. There are those that only do computer forensics, cyber
Hmm.
extortion, that type of thing.
Hmm.
There are those that only do insurance defense. There are those that only do domestic. There are those that only do corporate investigations. Um, Anyone who tells you, or anyone who knows anything about business will tell you that the best thing for your business is for you to choose a specific type of product and work with that type of product.
Okay.
That bores me. I'm sorry. I go against the grain. I got to do something different every time. I'll get bored doing the same type of investigation.
Yeah.
But I would say the most common is it's either two things. It's either surveillance, and in
Hmm.
doing surveillance, you're gathering facts, or it's doing investigations where you are gathering information, gathering facts for other types of cases. So those are the two most common.
All right. How about what differentiates a really good or great private investigator from maybe a bad one? Is that a fair
Well,
question?
yeah, no, that's a fair one. I mean, there are those that are so there. It's like any business, any other business. There are people that are really, really good. People like Kelly Riddle, people like Dean Beers. I could give you tons of names of different private investigators that have a fantastic national reputation for just being incredible private investigators. But
Hmm.
there are many of them that don't have that type of reputation. That For them, it's kind of the job is like an extension of a TV show, and they feel
Hmm.
like they're Magnum PI, running
Right.
around and
Yep.
flashing a badge and things like that. And also there are there are states. The licensing of private investigation is done at the state level. So, for example, in Texas, you have to have X number of years experience. You have to pay a fee. You have to take a test. You have to have a background investigation. You have to get fingerprinted
Hmm.
every 2 years, even though my fingerprints never change. Every 2 years, I got to get
You got to get them checked
reprinted.
out.
Yeah, and pay the fee. But that's
Yep.
another podcast. Anyway,
Yes, sir.
so uh, but there are 5 or 6 states where there is no requirement.
Hmm.
Alaska, Colorado, Wyoming, I think North Dakota, I think Mississippi. Now, some of the states like Wyoming, and I've worked in Wyoming, you don't need there's no state requirement, but if you work in the city of Cheyenne, which is the capital, that Cheyenne requires you to have a city license.
Hmm.
Colorado, There's no so if you wake up one morning and you've watched CSI or you know, The Rookie or The Castle or Magna PI, and you say,
Hmm.
I'm going to be a PI today, then you can do it. And so
Wow.
that's what the lack of the regulation leads to really lousy private investigators.
All right. All right. How about this? You're a licensed private investigator in the state of Texas,
Hmm.
correct? All right. So say you have a client that comes to you and says, "Hey, Scott, I'd like to hire you to do an investigation for XYZ, whatever it is. And but you need to travel to, say, Missouri or Illinois to do that." How does that work? Are there restrictions or parameters? Do you have to be licensed in the state that you travel to as a private investigator? Does that make sense?
No, it does. And so if you travel to a state that does not have licensing, of course, you can
Right.
do it. Some states offer reciprocity, where Texas doesn't, unfortunately,
Mm.
where if you are licensed in, and I'm just pulling these states,
Yeah, just hypothetically, yeah.
right, hypothetically, if you are licensed in Virginia, then then you're, and you end up following a subject into West Virginia, then you don't have to worry about it because they have reciprocity with each other.
Okay.
And then there
Okay.
are other states that, and this is what I really like. There are states like New Mexico. I had a case in, I think I had a case in Colorado, southern Colorado or southern Utah. You know those four corners where they all meet.
Right.
And I believe that the subject was going to go into New Mexico. I don't remember how I knew that. And so I talked with the New Mexican regulation department that handled private investigators because they do require licensing. And they basically just asked me to send them a letter, an email, an actual letter of what my investigation was, how long I would be there, where I would be, that type of thing. And so, if you, in their case, if the investigation originated in a state around them and ended up going into their state, they would allow you to do that, you know, and not
Sure.
be quote licensed in their state. Now, I couldn't go to New Mexico and just do an investigation. I'd have to be licensed there, but they allowed you to go in and do it if they had a letter. So,
Okay.
uh, but yeah, to the long story short, yeah, you would have to be licensed in that state, or you would have to hire another PI who's licensed in that state.
Okay. All right. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you're, operating within the law or operating within legal boundaries? Do you consult with attorneys, or does it require you to do, vast legal research yourself to ensure that you're following the law?
So it would depend on what type of work you do.
Okay.
Because obviously, if you're doing cyber forensics, computer forensics, the laws there, the rules of evidence there are different than if you're doing a domestic case. But
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, I have spoken with attorneys regarding certain things, but I've been doing this for so long that I'm already familiar with so much of what what I'm supposed to do, what I can do, what I can't do.
Okay.
For example, and even some states are a lot more strict. For example, here in Texas, if I'm let's say I'm doing a workers' comp investigation, a surveillance, and the guy, he got injured at work, and he's staying at home, getting better,
Right.
going to the clinic,
Right.
and do I sound sarcastic or cynical at all?
A smidge.
And so he's getting better, and he's getting part of his paycheck, workers' comp policy, and he will eventually get better, and he will return to work, and that's how workers' comp is supposed to work. And 7 out of 10, last time I looked, employees who are injured, that happens to them. They get better, they go back to work. No harm, no foul.
Hmm.
That's what the insurance is designed for. But about 30% decide, hey, this is a great time to put that new addition onto my house, or to take a vacation, or to learn how to water ski. Uh, and uh, and
Take up
they
powerlifting.
right, yes, and they their injuries may have been, oh, I don't know, maybe exaggerated a little bit.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
they do what we call malingering, which is they are better, but they try to milk that workers' comp as long as they can.
Yeah.
But there's red flags, and adjusters and investigators are aware of these red flags. But anyway, let's say I had a guy like that who was lifting weights in his garage, and he was in workers' comp for like a shoulder injury. Well, would be good video. You want to get him. And so if I'm parked on the street and I'm shooting my video and his garage door is open for the public to see, then that's fair game. In
Sure.
California, my understanding of California is it would not, because he's in his domicile. Whatever. It's
Right.
California. I'm
Right.
sorry. You probably just lost
Uh,
all your listeners in California. But anyway, you can blame me.
right.
Uh,
Right.
but, there's other things. Like I had an investigation where a guy was a baker, and he had, these are all in my book, by the way. He was a baker for a company in this area, and he was a real vile person. He had made a cake uh, in the shape of male anatomy, and
Hmm.
we're not talking about arms or hands,
Okay.
for a woman that was leaving, kind of a see ya, goodbye cake. And so
Hmm.
he got in a lot of trouble. They told him to leave, go home, and don't come back to work. We'll call you. And eventually they were going to fire him, and so they had me do surveillance on him that day. And this is common when companies are going to fire someone, they will hire a PI to follow them and to follow them after they're fired to see what they do, where they go. Are they
Hmm.
going to academy to buy guns, or are they just going to
Right.
go home or what? Yeah.
Right.
And so I got to his place. He was a baker, so you had to get there really, 4:30 in the morning. So I
Yeah, that's
was
super early hours.
some god awful hour I was there, and I was shooting video, waiting for him to leave, and I see a figure walk, and he had a big sliding glass window that was open. Now you don't shoot video, although shooting a video into a garage in the daytime when it's someone can see in there is fine. You don't shoot into other people's homes, like in their windows, because they do have
Hmm.
an expectation of privacy within their home.
Okay.
I was shooting video. I wasn't recording. I was just looking with the camera, and I see this guy walking back and forth. He's really, really pale. I'm like, man, this guy looks sick. He's like a serious vitamin B12 deficiency. He needs some sun. And I look a little bit closer. At first I thought he was wearing like a white unitard. And as soon as I thought that, I go, well, why would anybody be wearing a white unitard? Anyway, long story short, he was naked and he was walking back and forth. This was like a 60-year-old man naked, not something I wanted to see.
Right. There's some
So
things you do on your job that you could probably do without, right?
that's right.
That maybe being
So
one of them.
yeah, so I would not videotape him. Anyway, he went and he was fired, and I followed him, and everything was fine. He didn't do anything other than probably walk around naked in his house.
Hmm.
But yeah, so there's things like that. If you are shooting video, let's say someone's having a wild party in their backyard, and the back fence abuts a road, you cannot use a drone to fly it over and look in the backyard, nor can you lift your camera over the fence and
Hmm.
videotape. Well,
Hmm.
you can do it, but it's not going to be admissible
Right.
in court. Yeah. Because they have an expectation of privacy in their home. Now, if they had a chain link fence, that's a whole different story.
Different
I mean,
story, sure.
yeah, the public can see it. So, and that's essentially on surveillance, that's essentially what we do. We basically only are in public areas going to where the public would normally see the activities.
Hmm. How about this? Have you been called to testify in court as a result of one of your cases? And is that a common theme? Is that something that commonly occurs in your line of work?
It has. It does, and it has. I've been called numerous times to testify, and as you know, with attorneys with lawsuits, the entire justice system would grind to a halt if everybody had a trial, and
Right.
so the majority of cases are settled, are plea bargained, and so that's why it's rare for me to go to court because it's usually mediated. The parties are mediate, or there's a plea agreement, and so I don't have to. So court's never held, so I don't have to testify. But I have done it several times, and generally, I think almost every time I've done it, I am there to prove what we call proof video. I shot the specific video that
Mhm.
shows the individual who said they were paralyzed from the neck up, couldn't do anything, and I showed them out
Mhm.
there, fishing and doing all, pulling the boat up and things like that. And
Sure.
so I am there to tell the court that yes, I shot the video. That is a an accurate representation of the activities of this individual, and
Okay.
then let the defense attorneys or the
Let them
prosecuting
handle
attorneys
it.
get into me. Yeah.
Yep. All right. How about this? Has technology changed the field of private investigations? I know when you explained and talked about your investigation today, you talked about not having the ability to text one another, to text your partner. Over the time, over throughout your career, has technology changed? And if so, has it improved and helped you in your doing your daily work?
It has changed tremendously, night and day, game-changing technology, and it has almost all been for the better. So when I started, it was before cell phones. I mean, there were cell phones, but they were this big, and
So
they were like $1,000 a month, and
you put that giant magnetic antenna on top of your vehicle.
yeah, only wealthy, really, really wealthy people could afford them. And then
Hmm.
you could only talk for 2 minutes, and then the battery's dead. But
Right.
so there was no cell phones right away, and there was no email as well. No World Wide Web. I know I'm dating myself.
Oh
So
yeah.
basically, there was internet, but it wasn't, the World Wide Web is only part of the internet, but that's the internet that people think of as the internet. And so
Sure.
there's none of that, there were nothing like that. And so almost everything we found we did by, excuse me, by shooting videotape, 8 millimeter tape with a lot bigger video camera. It wasn't digital. And you'd have to take one tape out, put a new one in if you were still shooting video because you're
Yeah.
gathering evidence. We would go and pull records. We would go physically to the courthouse. We would go to voter registration. We would go to the DMV. We would go to different courts and things like that to gather civil records, criminal records, and look stuff up. We would look up divorce records. I'd get the actual paper record, open it up, and I could see the entire divorce. In Texas, it's public record. Divorce records are,
Hmm.
and not everywhere.
Sure.
But and so yeah, so that was very time consuming, and you also needed to know someone. You needed to have some connections. It helped to
Hmm.
have connections with the local police or with state government, things like that. But technology has totally changed all that with computers, with digital capabilities, and so now uh, we have digital cameras. The cameras are really small. In fact, we also have covert cameras where I can follow you into Home Depot
Hmm.
and stand right next to you and shoot video. And it looks like a key fob
Sure. Sure.
or a pair of eyeglasses or a
Yep.
pin. Yeah.
Very
Or
discreet equipment now that just didn't even exist back when
right,
you
right.
started.
Yeah.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
I remember using one of the first versions of that. It was a covert camera, and I'm a fan of the San Antonio Spurs, and
Yeah.
I had a Spurs mug, and it had a camera in it, and
Huh.
I could walk in and sip. I could actually sip water out of it and still use the camera. It was really crazy.
Hey,
But
side note, I was a huge Spurs fan growing up back, but this, I'm dating myself.
you are.
Back in the Artist Gilmore,
Oh
George
wow,
Gervin Iceman days, way
Iceman.
back then. That, I loved that team.
Jim, you may be older than I am then. I mean, I remember those guys, but I was more of a David Robinson
Oh,
and
yeah.
Tony
Yeah.
Parker guy. But I was
Yep.
there for
Yep.
all their championships. But anyway, we digress. Uh,
Yes.
but this particular camera was wireless. It was one of the first wireless ones, and so I had a belt underneath my shirt with a battery pack and a portable kind of a VCR, for lack of a better word.
Hmm.
And this half the time the thing wouldn't work. You would videotape, you would come back, and there'd be like the horizontal lines on the old TVs.
Yep.
So yeah, so technology has changed. Things are a lot smaller now, a little bit more expensive, Now, private investigators have what we call proprietary databases that are not open to the public. We can look up
Hmm.
information and find out what homes you own, what vehicles you own, uh,
Hmm.
basically credit header information that's not protected
Sure.
by federal law, that type of thing.
Okay. Oh, how about this? You talked about the equipment that you utilize. Have you ever been confronted by somebody that you're looking into or following? Hey, what are you following me for? And what's that mug that you're holding? Or you know what I'm saying? Something along those lines.
I have. That's called being burned or being
Mm-hmm.
made, which I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the vernacular that you guys
Yeah.
used.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although being burned or made in your business could end up being killed, but
Unfortunately, you're right.
ours it could happen as well. But generally, it meant you were humiliated, your ego was hurt, and the investigation was ruined.
Yeah.
So, but yes, it has happened. I have been burned. I have been made. If any PI tells you they haven't, they're either
They,
lying to you or they just started yesterday.
yeah. That makes complete sense. I would agree with that.
Yeah, because it's a real fluid environment. But I've had I had there's a Hell's Angel guy. Hey, this is right up your neck of the woods.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
doing surveillance on this guy that was in the Hell's Angels, and I don't know how he figured out who I or where I was, but I thought I parked in a really good place. He was in an apartment complex. And I got all set up and got my camera going, and I'm sitting there waiting for him to leave. And all of a sudden, I see him walk out the door towards my car, and he's about probably 40 yards away. So I don't know he's walking towards me at first. He's just walking, and
Hmm.
he has his cut on, and he's like really huge and mean looking and tattooed, and you know me, I'm a harmless, lovable little fuzzball. I'm not. That's not my style. So
Hmm.
eventually, I got to the point where I thought, is he coming my way? It looks like he's coming my way. You don't want to get up and leave right away because he may
Right.
go into someone's house next door and you've got some good
Hmm.
video.
Hmm.
But he kept getting closer and closer. And then I'm looking at his eyes and I'm like, oh, he's on to me. So I got in the car. I mean, I was in the car. I turned the car on. And as soon as I turned the car on, he starts running towards me. And I took off. So he didn't catch me. But
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. He had pretty good, situational awareness. But yeah, I've
Yeah.
been burned on surveillance. People
Well, that
stopped if
just
they,
means you're doing your job, right?
yeah.
That's the nature of the game sometimes. That happens.
It's difficult, yeah. Oh, and I will tell you this, you work for the federal government. When you do surveillance with the feds, and you not always, but you've got three or four people doing it with you. You've got air
Right.
support at times.
Right.
Uh, you may have a tracker on. When you do it as a PI, it's just you. Occasionally, you
Mm.
might use two people, and so it's a little bit more difficult. We don't,
Yeah.
we can't flash
There's
a
a lot of
badge, that type of thing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a lot of moving parts that one individual has to try and deal with. That makes complete sense. You have to prioritize what you're doing where, like you said, we would have teams. Like you would have
Hmm.
specific surveillance groups or teams that would set up and go do that. So yeah, great point. How about this? And I'll just ask a couple more questions here and we'll move towards conclusion, but
Sure.
have you ever had to turn a case down or are there certain cases that Scott just doesn't do for some reason? During your career, you're like, "Hey, I don't want to do that or I can't do that."
Yeah, I mean, I've had cases like that. I mean, so this is very common. You'll have someone call and say, "Hi, I need a PI. I'm trying to find my old friend Jennifer. We lost track. I haven't seen her in ages. And I want to see if you can give me her home address and her phone number so I can get a hold of her." Sounds harmless enough, right? No.
Hmm.
Uh, Typically what this is sometimes it's legit, but if and we sit there and we talk to the person, try to figure things out. But most of the time it is somebody who's stalking them or
Hmm.
someone who was a ex-boyfriend that they don't want to see anymore. And so I typically just tell the person, sorry, I can't do it. I'm not comfortable with it. It's not what I do. I try to make an excuse. I don't want to hurt people's feelings because I don't
Right.
know for sure.
Right.
Excuse me. Occasionally I get a really good idea. Yeah, this person's a creep. And if that's the case, as soon as I hang up, I send an email to all the local PIs and let them know, hey, there's a
Mm,
guy. Here's his name. He's going to be calling. He's trying to find information so that someone so they no one gets hurt. Now, if it is legit, I'll tell them, all right, here's what I'll do. You will have to pay me to find them, but I can't give you their contact information. I will give their contact information. I will give your contact information to them, and it will be up to them if they decide to reach out to you. And
yeah.
the stalkers will say, well, forget that. And the people who
Yeah.
are legit will say, that sounds good. I appreciate that. Would work.
Oh,
So,
that's a great idea.
yeah.
A very good safety measure right there.
There's another type of case that I don't do, and because just because something is legal doesn't mean it's ethical.
True.
And there are cases that are called decoy cases where a woman will hire a PI because she thinks that her husband might cheat. Not that he's cheating, but he might, and she wants to test him. And so
Hmm.
a decoy will go to a bar, and her husband's at the bar having a drink or whatever, and a really attractive woman will walk up to him and basically try to entice him to cheat, to come home with her, to do all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, it's legal in a lot of places, but I find it unethical. I find it it borders on I forget the legal term, but when
Oh,
you're
entrapment
entrapment,
almost.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
trying to entice someone to break the law, and
Yeah.
in this case, you know, breaking, having committing adultery, although it's a law in some places, it's not technically illegal.
Right.
It's still unethical for me, in my view, to entice someone to
Yeah.
try to do that. So I just
I
say
would agree
no.
with that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would agree with that. All right, let me ask one last question here. Can you remember or recall your first case as a private investigator and how it went?
It didn't go good. Yeah, I remember that.
Well, if you don't want to talk about it, we can
No,
move on.
it didn't go good because it just didn't work. But I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't horrible or anything. So I was trained by I primarily do surveillance, all types. I was trained by a previous investigator for 2 weeks. He was a great investigator, but he wasn't the best trainer. And so he would tell me everything and he would show me, but he never let me do any practical application with him.
Hmm.
I had to do that on my own. And surveillance is the type of activity that you can train someone, you can watch videos, you can read books, but until you actually get out there and do it and make mistakes and tell yourself, I won't do that next time,
Right.
that's the best way to learn. And so at the end of 2 weeks, they cut me loose, and I had to go do surveillance on this apartment complex. And and so I was all giddy. I was excited. I got to the apartment complex, and I was younger then. I drove in, and I sat in the parking lot like this, like, right, I'm a PI. I'm on surveillance. And after about an hour, I realized, wait a minute, I don't even know where these people live. I'm not even looking at their apartment. I don't know what apartment I mean, I knew I had to go find their actual apartment.
Sure.
So I get out of my car, I go over to where their apartment is, I see the apartment, and then I see the vehicle because we have their vehicle. So I walk back to where I was parked, which is on the other side of the complex. I get in my car and I drive around, and their car's gone. So they had left in the interim, and
Oh
so
man.
stupid stuff like that.
Sure.
You live and learn. I followed people, and I thought I did a really good job. And they turn around and get out of the car and they waved to me. That
Yeah.
happened. So yeah,
Yep. I hear you. You say that, I've been burned as well, and a lot of my coworkers have. And you'll be out on surveillance sitting in your car in a neighborhood. We've had neighbors or residents walk up and knock on the window,
yeah,
and they'll be like, "Hey, what are you doing here?"
I've had that
So
happen.
yeah, it happens. So I get it. Let me, do you have any advice or suggestions for people out there that are interested in pursuing a career as a private investigator?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, well, here's the main thing that I would say: make your mistake on somebody else's dime. If you want to be a private investigator and you want to have your own company like I do, then work for someone else first. Learn get paid from them to learn, to make mistakes, to, really cut your teeth on how to conduct investigations, whatever type of investigation it is, or surveillance. So when you start your own company and when you're on your own, you will have learned all that stuff, and you won't be making as much mistakes as you had in the past. But it requires a tremendous amount of patience. And I was in the army where everything's like hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait,
Yeah.
and we're leaving at noon, and we leave 2 days later. So I've got a lot of patience, and you have to have a lot of tenacity. If ask somebody, do you know so and so? No. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I know you know them. They used to be your next door neighbor. Well, okay, well I did know them. You got to be tenacious and kind of pursue things. So
Right. I think that's great advice. Well, let's kind of switch to this. You wrote a book about your career.
mhm.
Talk about that. Tell us the title and where folks, what it's about and where people can find it.
Well, I have one here. Confessions of a
Excellent.
Private Eye.
Excellent.
So it's Confessions of a Private Eye. So basically, years ago, as I would drive to, go to hotels and different, because I've done investigations throughout the Southwest, all over the place. Um, if I'm in a hotel in Omaha, or if I'm in California, or if I'm flying somewhere, people would always ask, "What do you do?" I'm a private investigator. Then they want to know, oh, it must be exciting all the time. Tell me some stories. And so I would tell them stories. And then at some point it turned into a blog. And then I realized, you know what? I ought to take all these blog entries and make them into a book. And so that's essentially what I did. Uh, I had been doing it for almost 30 years at that point, and I basically made an outline, and I just started expanding on that outline and filling in particular
Hmm.
cases and things that I did, how I got to be a PI, and I used all pseudonyms. I changed the locations and names for
Yep.
privacy's sake, but I wanted people to get an idea of what being a private investigator is like. It's sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's exciting. Sometimes you are sweating like a gravy sucking pig in your car. Sometimes you're freezing your duff off. Uh, you know, Sometimes you are bored out of your mind. Sometimes you are really scared. I mean, there's all kinds of emotions. Sometimes you can't get the information. You don't get a whole lot of sleep, as you can see by the bags under my eyes. When you don't get a whole lot of sleep as a PI.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I put it all in that book. It's available in audio, Kindle, or ebook, paperback, and hardback. And it's I wrote it in 2018. Took me about a year to write it.
Hmm.
And the worst part of it was the editing. But
Oh, I could imagine.
I read it over and over and over again at very last month as I edited it, make sure it had continuity, make sure I
Hmm.
was telling everything in order. And I was pretty much sick of my own book by the time that was over with. So,
I hear you. All right. Well, people can find it. I'm guessing on Amazon.
yeah, you can find it on Amazon. You can, if you go to your local bookstore, Barnes and Noble, they probably won't have a copy, but they can order it for you. They can get a copy
Excellent.
for you.
Excellent. Okay. Well, talk to us about your podcast. You have would you categorize it as a true crime podcast?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of a continuation of my book. I love I'm a people person, in case you didn't know, and I love
I
talking
kind
to
of
people.
noticed.
Yeah, well, I knew you knew that because you are too.
Yeah.
Uh, so having a podcast is something that's always interested me. I think in one of my alter egos, I wanted to be a radio announcer, but that's a very volatile field, especially
Hey, you do
these days.
have a good voice.
Yeah, well, thank you. Uh, and so I decided to start the podcast. Started about a year ago, and essentially what I do is, it is a true crime podcast, but I make a few different changes from your typical ones. What I do is I interview investigators, I talk to journalists, I talk to book authors, detectives, nurses, all kinds of folks that are some way um, um, have anything to do with a specific type of crime. I don't conduct what I call murder of the week podcasts, where every day
Mhm.
or every week it's somebody got killed and here's how it happened. And
Right.
uh, with here's the lure, the salacious details, and I don't do that. I can't do that. I'm tired of that.
Hmm.
I don't want to subject myself or other people to that.
Yeah,
It's sensationalism. If you want to do that, well, power to you, but it's too
sure.
sensationalistic for me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so for example, I interviewed you. It was the
Hmm.
outlaw motorcycle gang. I've interviewed a guy over red collar fraud. I have interviewed a person that wrote a book about serial killers. I did interview a Chicago homicide detective over murder. I just don't do the murders every time. So
Sure,
it's a
it's not
different
every
type of
single
crime.
time.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got fraud, we have kidnapping, I have a sextortion case coming up. I've got a serial killer that was a nurse that killed a bunch of patients. It's all something different.
It's a
And it kind of
variety of things.
Right. And it kind of goes with how I do in my PI work. I like to do something different. I can't do the same old thing every time. I need Monday to be different from Tuesday. And I
Yeah.
can't sit behind a desk, although I'm sitting behind a desk right now. But
Now, your podcast can be found on Spotify, right? Spotify, Apple.
yes, it's all, yeah, you can find it. It's called A Study in Crime. You can find it pretty much wherever you're going to find podcast, or you can go to astudyincrime.com and you can find it there. I think I just finished episode 40. You and I started about the same time. You may have started
Yeah,
right before me.
yeah, yeah.
So, I think I've got
Uh,
about 40 episodes. I've got about a little over 50 that are ready to go. So,
Sure.
yeah, it comes out
I,
every
you know,
Tuesday.
yeah, like you said, I was a guest on there. You ask tremendous questions. I've listened to most, if not all, of your episodes, and they're tremendous episodes. I find them very interesting. So I can't, recommend it enough. It's a quality podcast because, like you said, some of these just beat a dead horse with one
Yeah.
specific topic, and that might be that individual specialty. But if you're interested in a variety of things, your podcast is right up that alley. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I patterned it a little off of there's a podcast called Criminal, and they essentially do the same thing. Everything, it's a little bit different type of crime every time. And
Yeah.
so it comes out every Tuesday, and yeah, give it a listen.
Yep. Good deal. Well, any last comments or anything we need to circle back on that we talked about today?
No, but I will say that when I interviewed you, I lived vicariously through you for the next week. I thought it was awesome what you did with the Outlaw Motorcycle Gang.
Oh, hey,
They
well,
need to
thank
make a
you.
movie out of your life, Jim. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I don't know about that, but I have to agree I was fortunate. I consider myself fortunate to have been able to work those type of investigations during my career. And as I get older, I find that I enjoy sharing with people what law enforcement does. And, that's an aspect of it that is very, I find it interesting. And I think it can be helpful and a learning point for individuals. So I appreciate the opportunity you gave me to discuss that. Thank you, Scott.
No, you're welcome. I think I know the environment we live in is kind of anti-law enforcement in some circles, but boy, nothing could be farther from the truth. If you Law enforcement officers, whether they're federal or local, they meet people every day. They meet people. It's the person's worst day,
Hmm.
and they deal with children that are left in a hot car, or people who are murdered, or battered women, and then they go home and okay, let's have dinner and let's play with the kids. You
Right.
know,
Right. Yeah.
it's
You're
not an
supposed
easy
to
job.
just, yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right. Well, hey, again, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. And I know the listeners are going to thoroughly enjoy this conversation, Scott. I appreciate it.
Jim, it's been my pleasure. Anytime.
All right, thank you. Well, hey, I want to kind of transition to the my listeners out there, and I want to thank you for listening in today. And I want to ask if you could please continue to like, follow, and share my episodes and my social media. That helps me bring top quality, high caliber guests like Scott to the show. So please continue to do so. And that concludes today. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you. The Right to Remain Silent podcast is brought to you by Streetwise 360 Studios. I would like to again thank today's guest for sharing the story right here on the podcast. Please remember to like, follow, share, and recommend us so that I can continue to bring you high caliber guests sharing their experiences, just like we heard today. If your law enforcement agency is interested in training provided by Streetwise 360, or if you know someone that has an interesting law enforcement story to share, please contact me via the website www.streetwise-360.com. www.streetwise-360.com.